that I commune with my God, etc. But then I want to get to something else here, which is that I've seen a lot of people in the libertarian world, especially, saying, I don't know if you know this, but these shutdowns are unconstitutional.
Oh my God.
Please stop saying this. Please stop saying this. Unless you're prepared to quote chapter and verse of your own state's constitution, don't say this. Don't say this anymore. Your state has its own state constitution. And maybe, according to that constitution, it would be illegal for the governor to shut down churches or this or that. But under the original Constitution of the United States as written, it does not say, the First Amendment does not say, Congress or the state legislatures or the governors shall make no law respecting establishment of religion. If it did say that, you might have a point, because then it would apply to the states. But when the Constitution of the United States was written, where I live in Massachusetts, there was already a state constitution of Massachusetts, which required, and still does, the state legislature to make laws respecting establishments of religion. They had to raise taxes and require that towns vote on what kind of established religion that they would have, and that church would be established and funded through state taxes. Are these people going to tell me that when the United States Constitution was ratified, it nullified one of the articles of the Massachusetts Constitution? Because if you're going to say that, you thought of this on your own, but 200 years after this happened, or 100 years after this happened, nobody thought of that. Nobody in Massachusetts said, wait a minute, we're not supposed to make laws respecting an establishment of religion.
I know you have a response to this, but just toss it to you, incorporation doctrine. Okay, carry on.
Yes, there's the incorporation doctrine, the idea that was created by a bunch of judges that, ever since about 50 years after the 14th Amendment, that means that the federal government gets to enforce the Constitution of itself, of the U.S. Constitution, against the states. I have not seen that argument. The proposition of the truth of that argument is dubious at best.
Well, luckily, Andrew Cuomo is going to fight against this for us. Andrew Cuomo is going to lead the charge against the 14th Amendment.
But my point is that a lot of these people who say this, they couldn't tell you what the incorporation doctrine is. They just assume, well, it says the government can't make laws about peaceably assemble. The United States Constitution, you dumb fuck. That's about it says Congress shall make no law. And you don't have to follow this anyway, because you have to remind yourself, just because something's constitutional, that's not the end all be all. It may be the case that the United States Constitution authorizes the government to do something. That doesn't mean you have to shut up about it and say, well, they get to do it. You can still say this is a bad policy. It's a wrong policy. It's a tyrannical policy. This idea that I'm surprised that libertarians are still peddling this shit, where it's this sort of unspoken idea that, well, if it's constitutional, we have to just bend over and take it. And if it's not constitutional, all we have to do is say the magic word, unconstitutional, and it'll go away.
You have to remember, all the Constitution says, listen, you may think that the Constitution has a whole lot of amendments about, taxes and the organization of government and who can levy an army, who can do this or that. Here's what the Constitution says, Dan. The Constitution says I can do whatever I want within reason. That's all it says. I can do what I want within reason, and within reason is decided by me arguing about it and, popular vote. If I lose the vote, I can take it to the court, and then the court decides what's within reason. That's all the Constitution says.
I'm just sick of this idea, and this is I know you're joking, but yeah, this is the constitutional theory of everyone. Republican, Democrat, conservative,
and libertarians.
Liberal, and libertarian. Their constitutional theory amounts to this. Well, if I don't like it, it's unconstitutional. And if I do like it, then it must be constitutional. Nobody ever says, I really hate that law, but it is constitutional, but I'm still going to argue against it. And nobody ever really says, I really, really wish that this could be the case, that the law could be thus and so, but it would be unconstitutional. So very few people in history ever argue that way.
Maybe the prohibitionists were the only people
There have been people like that. I know Barry Goldwater talked about that with certain civil rights laws. There have been people I know of, I don't know their names, but I know there have been liberal legal scholars that have written saying, I wish we could have gun control, but we can't until we amend the Constitution, etc. So there are people like that. But for the average person, they really do think, well, I don't like this, so it's got to be unconstitutional. And then they think if it is constitutional, then it must be good, or at the very least, they have no argument against it.
Another weird thing libertarians have been saying, I've been seeing this strange, I feel like I've been sent back in time to like 2012 or 2015 maybe, where I'm seeing a whole lot of libertarians just echo this very shallow take. I think that the virus is a big deal, but I also think that the government is overstepping its bounds by locking us down, and that's it. Which, to me, it's like, imagine it was a school shooting, and someone says, listen, I agree with the left when I say that we have a whole lot, like, we have a very serious problem of mass shootings in this country. Also, I'm against gun control, and there's nothing else, right? There's nothing, like, do you believe in that more guns means less crime? Do you, if you agree that there's a problem that we have, and you're like, I'm opposed to this thing, like, okay, that's great. I think the virus is a big deal, and I also think the government's doing something bad. I think what I should do is go outside and send young people out to catch it, and then we can build up herd immunity. That's my counter proposal, right? I have a clear counter proposal. I am young. I am not at risk. I don't tend to associate with old people, and I am a college student. I have plenty of time. I think it's like, for me and people like me, the thing for us to do is for people who are similar to me is to catch the disease, stay home for 2 weeks, and then start going back to work.
Yeah.
That is my proposal.
Yeah, it's so vapid and stupid. It's one of these things where, like, almost everybody agrees with that, because almost everybody agrees, yeah, this virus is, quote, a big deal, whatever that means, because I'm probably on the opposite end of that, where I would be in the camp that says it's not a big deal.
Oh, yeah, or nut up and say it's not a big deal. Right, just...
But even I would say, depends on your definition, because, yeah, it's a big deal. I mean, it might kill 60,000 Americans. That's not a big deal. But, like, you know, the flu kills a lot of people, and it's a big deal. But, like, so what does that mean? It doesn't really mean anything. And then the idea that, oh, well, and I also don't like the lockdown. Most of the people I know who have been most vocal in favor of the lockdown and giving me the most arguments and pushback on this, they're against it. They don't like it. They're saying, oh, I think it goes too much, and I don't like it, and I wish we didn't have to have it, but we have to. Like, they don't know. Very few people are really saying, oh, I love the lockdown. You know, I love it. I think it's great. We should do it every year, whether we need to or not. They just pop in to show, hey, I'm really, really reasonable and nuanced and smart. And, you know, I have two ideas that I hold in my head at the same time. Well, congratulations. So does pretty much everybody else.
Another news thing. So Donald Trump has defunded the World Health Organization. With, there's a very funny interview where a person asks about Taiwan's response, and the guy who's getting the interview, not only does he decline to recognize Taiwan, like, not just politically, as in he literally pretended not to hear any question with the word Taiwan in it.
I liked when he hung up on them on the Zoom or the Skype call, and then they call him immediately back, and he goes, oh, okay, cool. And then they ask him a different question, and he just answers it and goes, well, we're going to go now.
Yes.
Sorry, I lost you. That was so funny. They asked him that, and he goes, what did he say? They asked the question about Taiwan, and then he says, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. And then she goes to repeat it, and he goes, no, we can just go on to another question. What? It was like something out of Parks and Rec.
No, I'll tell you exactly where it was from. That is a skit from Sacha Baron Cohen's movie The Dictator, where he's being interviewed by Larry King about his nuclear weapons policy, and he's like, I'm sorry, I don't understand the questions. Like, are you building nuclear weapons? Like, I can't hear you.
All right, let's get right to it. Do you have nuclear weapons?
What was the question?
Do you have nuclear weapons?
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Are you developing nuclear weapons?
No, I literally can't hear you.
I'm going to another question.
Oh, I can hear you now.
Let's move on to another question. All right, I heard you perfectly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
it's so ridiculous.
And as I should mention, this is a true case of indulging in you may think, oh, it's what Marcel said about religion, or, oh, it's what Marcel said about, Cuomo taking those ventilators. No, a true case of something that is borderline cognitive dissonance for me. It's when I see it, and I know in theory I should be for it, but I'm intensely skeptical of it. It's whenever I hear anybody talking badly about the United Nations. I know, yes, it's a collection of nation states, I'm sorry. The whole John Birch Society line, of all the things to accept the John Birch Society line on, the idea that you would take it on the United Nations is just inherently suspicious to me. And most people that dislike the UN dislike it not because it's a foreign entanglement that gets us into wars, but because it's in theory an international body that could offer some rhetorical pushback against wars. And so whenever I hear anybody who's really sounding off against the UN, I was like, I really can't take this. You got to be Scott Horton. If you're not literally Scott Horton criticizing the UN, I really very rarely want to hear it. It's a true ad hominem in my mind, and it's just the way I live my life.
I don't have the energy to fight you on this.
Right. But the other thing is, so this China lied, people died narrative has this very weird implication because it makes you wonder, what is the CIA for? Right. The idea that, so a country lies and our policy is based around like Chinese state TV. Like, does the CIA just watch Xinhua News in the morning? And it's like, hey, China's, Trump says, oh, hey, head of the CIA, what's going on in China? And the guy's like, the same way
Let me call Xi Jinping and ask him, hey, Xi, what's going on?
Yeah. I have an excuse. Like, when I need news on like the Syrian civil war, I'll just watch a South Front video every other day, right? I get one source and it is a biased one and I know it. And so it's one thing if I say, oh, I was caught by surprise because South Front lied to me. I'm not the Central Intelligence Agency. If there were a team of me, we would have more sources than just South Front. And I would hope the CIA, given all the money we give them, has some other source on what's going on in China than the state news apparatus.
I'm glad you pointed that out because I've noticed this when Trump was talking about the that clip he played where he showed them all, oh, see, we were all wrong. The common idea that everyone spreads is, well, because China misled all of us. Which again, maybe if you're a regular person, you could say, well, I just get my news from wherever. I don't know. I don't have any outside sources. And then for journalists, it has less credibility because you're supposed to be digging into these things. But then, yeah, for the government to say, well, China said it was no big threat. So, like you said, what does our CIA do? Do they just have a guy is the CIA's sort of China division just a guy pulling press releases off of a printer or a fax machine somewhere and saying, all right, here's my China file, and he just puts it in a filing cabinet?
Especially a Trump administration, which is hostile to China. It would be one thing, if Japan or South Korea were lying to us, because at least those are strategic allies. So I doubt that the CIA is like second guessing any numbers they give. We kind of assume Japan's a friendly state. They even, maybe they embellish some things, but we kind of take them at their word. It's not like but China's China, right? China's a well-known lying country.
Yeah, it doesn't. The narrative doesn't make sense on its own terms. Because it's one of these things. It's like the mask thing, where so suddenly I guess we need masks. Either you were lying yourself about the mask, or you're like so blindingly incompetent, like that either answer disqualifies you from existing. Like if you got this information from China, either the CIA shouldn't exist.
China is a country, by the way, where mask wearing is common, right? In East Asian countries, mask wearing is part of the culture.
Either our governments are lying about this, or they're so wildly incompetent, and I don't know which answer disqualifies them more. But like either answer would seem to imply they should be gone.
You are either lying or you're stupid.
Oh, you're stupid.
I'm stupid. I'm stupid.
I'm stupid.
Oh, speaking of essential businesses, by the way, WWE has been declared an essential business.
Yeah, because it's just a naked scam.
Right. I mean, it's because Janet McMahon is, I think she's like some kind of education or thing or whatever, and her husband, as we well know, is Vince McMahon, who has personally wrestled Donald Trump, although Donald Trump defeated Vince McMahon during WrestleMania 21 or whatever. So, really, Vince McMahon should be the one genuflecting to him.
Yes, but maybe in another sense, it's sort of noblesse oblige.
Yeah, there's a it's yes, so please. Yeah, there's a great picture of Donald Trump with a bunch of WWE people, and it's like 2/3 of people in this photo have hit Donald Trump with a Stone Cold Stunner. By right, they should be president. Let's just really take a minute, have a moment of reflection,